Hi, welcome. I'm Eleanor and I'm back in the Poetry Kitchen talking once again about the forward prizes that are going to be announced in the fall. At the moment, I set myself the challenge of reading the 5 books that were shortlisted for Best Poetry Book for the Forward Prize. And you probably already watched my discussion about Kaveh Akbar's book, Pilgrim Bell. And, it's been a couple of weeks, and I have to say that looking back at Pilgrim Bell again, I wouldn't say it's gone down in my estimation, but there's very little I really would want to go back and look at again. It's really I don't think that the power of the poetry was enough to keep me interested for a second reading after a week or two. And I'm trying now to move on. But as I've moved on, each book, there's 5 books altogether, has had issues for me. I just haven't really clicked with any of the books. And that's a real challenge for me. More so than I found with other books, which is interesting because I've reviewed a lot of books on this channel already that really weren't my cup of tea. I skim read the other 4 books and then came back to a couple and reread the first halves of the book several times. And no matter how much I tried, I just couldn't get myself to like these books. So here I am, and I want to talk about the next book I've chosen to discuss, which is All the Men I Never Married by Kim Moore. Now, it's a beautiful cover, as you can see, absolutely gorgeous, and the title is so good too. And I've always really thought that poetry books would be better if they had one all-encompassing theme. And usually when they have an all-encompassing theme, it's usually grief. Someone has died in the poet's family and they're just writing through their grief. And that's okay if you're in that mood. But here was this book, All the Men I Never Married, and I thought there would be, it would be of more interest to me, and it would have some sort of a narrative arc through it. In any case, it does have that. But I also found that the poems became boring, very repetitive, extraordinarily dull for the subject matter. So the subject matter is the experiences of whoever is the speaker in the poems. And there is a feeling that it almost always feels biographical. It almost always feels like non-fiction or perhaps autofiction. I feel that it's Kim Moore talking to us through these poems, and they're all about different specific experiences that the female speaker has had with misogyny or sexual assault. And they can be large experiences or they can be small instances. In any case, it still left me cold. Even though here I am, a woman living, in this time and having somewhat similar experiences. And there's certain specific techniques that Kim Moore uses that I can absolutely point to as being derivative and, for lack of a better word, boring. There's certain poems that have repetition in them, and I've pretty much had enough of that. I see that it's a much-loved technique by contemporary English writing poets, and I think it's a lazy technique. It's that listing of sentences with the repetition of the first part of the sentence. For example, the 6th poem in the book. Then a man approached you in a nightclub, that you were polite at first, then turned your back, that he insisted on giving you his number, that you put it in your pocket, that you danced with your friend all night. I can see what she's doing, and perhaps for younger readers who haven't read much poetry, this would be effective. But she goes on for a long time. I mean, there's 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 lines, finishing with that our bodies are dangerous things. It's just lazy to me and boring. She also uses a technique that at first, when I saw it being used by contemporary poets, I got excited about, because I thought, oh, that's something I haven't seen. I've seen it now for 4 or 5 times from different poets, and I've had enough. It's the backwards poem. It's so boring. It's the poem that you start describing a traumatic incident at the moment of trauma, and then you work backwards. So the poem is it's like putting a video of your trauma in reverse. It feels like a gimmick to me now, and so here we are. What else can I say? A few interesting things that happen in this book, and a few moments of really successful poetry happen as you go further into the book. A really odd thing that happened with this book to me, I've never seen happen before in poetry books, is that it starts off boring, derivative, cliche, and about halfway through, I had a note to myself that said, this is actually good. So this was like halfway through the book. Then the next few poems, I wrote to myself, lovely strange story. That's the poem about Actaeon. And then I actually wrote to myself the question, is this book getting better? And then on poem 33, I believe, I wrote, wow, it definitely is getting better. So for whatever reason, and maybe it just happens that I feel like the poems towards the end of the book are better than the first ones, but the first ones seem to be maybe encouraging the beginner reader, the young person who would pick up the book and benefit greatly from its message of empathy, of community, of honesty concerning the horrifying experiences women go through on a daily basis because of their being women. And maybe towards the end, some of the more subtle, complex, mysterious poems that have more what I call good weirdness in them, then they are introduced. And by good weirdness, I mean that I can't remember which of my teachers said this, or I may have read it, but they said a good poem should always have something weird in it. And I found that to be absolutely the case. So towards the end of this book, there are some really weird poems that captured my imagination and took me where I want to go when reading poems. And most amazingly, the last poem just blew it out of the water. So when you're looking at the last poem, you're looking at something that piques your imagination, doesn't deal in too many tropes or cliches, whatever you want to call them. It's called, all of the poems are really just numbered and are titled by the first line of the poem. So the last poem is when he told me not to tell the story of my mother's hair. I was obedient for many years. Now, you've got me there. There's the mystery, like, why would he, this male person tell you, the speaker, and it's understood all the speakers here are female, why would he be telling you not to tell the story of your mother's hair? And the way the speaker writes this poem in these 3 stunning stanzas, and the ending, which I don't even want to read out loud because in a way it's a spoiler. Wow. You know, this last poem is what to me this whole book could have been. Now, why wasn't the whole book this? It can be any number of reasons. I feel that a lot of what this book is doing is to do with what non-fiction poetry is aiming for, which is clarity over mystery, and even more so because the entire book is dealing with the social experience of misogyny and sexual assault on women. And when that happens, I think you want to portray what exactly is happening in the world, which is your own personal experience. These are possibly all the poet's experiences, or they might be collected, but there's this feeling that she's documenting this. And that makes for a very different book. And so keeping that in mind, it's a good book. It's not, you know, non-fiction poetry is not my thing. I'll be the first to admit it. But whenever I read it, I do learn a lot. I didn't, though, find it comforting to me specifically as a woman. And that might be because of many different reasons. So there you have it. I did look a bit more into Kim Moore's background out of interest. I will say that I'll leave a link to a YouTube video in which she reads one of the poems from the book. She's an excellent reader. These poems might be better listened to than read, I'll have to say. As well as that, I think that I noticed that there's a musicality and a really lovely rhythm in most of the poems. And it wasn't a surprise to me then to see that she herself is a musician and she plays and teaches the trumpet, which I think informs a lot of her poetry in a wonderful way. Also, she just got a doctorate in poetry and everyday sexism. And that really says it all. This could be, you know, part of her doctorate. And I can see that within, if you were studying social work, social studies, I can certainly see that this book will be extremely useful. And I think that a lot of women will find comfort in it. But as for the poetry itself, it really disappointed me. So that's it for the moment. I will try to continue as quickly as possible to read the next 3, I've already read them, but to really delve into the next 3 books and discuss them, because my aim for the month of August is to get involved in the Sealey challenge. Nicole Sealey, whose book I have reviewed already, and look it up because she's a great poet. Her book was Ordinary Beast. She sets a challenge every month to anyone who wants to read a poetry book a day for the whole month of August. So I'm going to try to do that and really push myself. Okay, thank you very much. Please don't forget that the only real property is the property of the mind, and I'll see you for the next discussion. Thank you. Bye-bye.